Welcome to Cider Chat. We're delving into what tempts us to try a particular cider. Some makers are getting it oh so wrong, and some, well, what are they getting right? Hello, my name is Rhea Windcaller, and I am the producer and cider MC of this weekly podcast, where we speak with makers, cider enthusiasts, and folks within the cider trade from around the world.
Hip, hip, hooray!
We have part 3 of a 4-part series from the Bringing the Bellies to the Bar panelist discussion from CraftCon 2021. This virtual online conference took place in April of this year, and I have been breaking down the 4 topic areas discussed into a 4-part series to provide a wee bit more spaciousness for you and I and so many people who are both in the market, who are consumers, and who just love cider, to have a bit more spaciousness to really consider these different topic areas, because I think it's so important, certainly as our world is slowly opening. You know, we changed a lot this past year, and there's a lot of opportunity to reinvent ourselves, keep the same narration going, or to change it up a little bit with a little bit of perhaps a different twist. So we're going to be going there next, but first, there'll be a wee bit of news out and about in Ciderville. I have 2 news items coming out of the good state of Vermont, which is north of my special spot in Ciderville in New England. And the first one that I want to mention is a date that you want to put on your calendar now if you are in this territory in August 21st to be specific, because they're going to have something called the Vermont Nanofest. And that's a term that you often will hear in the brewing industry, a nano brewery, which is typically like a 3-barrel brewery. I'm not really sure if there's a specific category for a nano cidery at this point, because honest to goodness, you know, a lot of folks who are fermenting at home, they have enough cider fermenting away that they could probably be considered a nano cidery without the commercial license. But it's a small setup. And this Nano Fest in Vermont is going to take place, like I said, on the 21st of August, and it's going to be in the town of Tunbridge. So that is a little to the west of New Hampshire, so it's not too far over the border, in just a beautiful area, and not too far from one of my favorite ciders in Vermont, which is Flag Hill Farm. The cider maker there is Sebastian Lusader, and I have had him on an episode here. I'm going to put a link in the show note, but this is such a cool cidery. It's one of the oldest cideries in the U.S. He started back in the 90s, so certainly one of the first commercial cideries, and to top it off, totally off the grid. Not only a cidery, but also a distillery, and he told the story, I think it's in the episode that I published with Sebastian, on how when the feds showed up to license and do like a site check to make sure that it was, you know, all on the up and up, having a distillery there, they were a little nervous because, you know, it's one of those you can't get there from here type of situations. It's kind of up a windy mountain on a mountaintop, no electrical lines or anything, probably no cell service at that time when it was starting off. And, you know, the feds in their little suits and stuff and, you know, sunglasses and long jackets were probably freaked out. Kind of love that. Anyways, get myself in trouble on that. You know, good people, but, you know, some of these regulations are just like, oh my goodness. Anyways, he makes really great Pomme de Vie. It's like a eau de vie, an apple brandy. Oh, I love his product there. And some great ciders, all certified organic. So off the grid, all certified organic. And what I can see right now, he is the only cidery that's going to be taking part in that. But it doesn't mean that you can't be in that area and check out so many other cideries too. And there's going to be a ton of breweries too. So maybe, you know, you cross both sides of the spectrum where you enjoy beer and you enjoy cider. This is going to be a fun event, August 21st. When I come back, I have another little bit of news from Vermont. Well, I received a special delivery of some cider in cans, and this came from Eden Specialty Ciders. And they're based up in Vermont too. up in Newport, Vermont, so it's even further north than Flag Hill, right on the border of Canada, which is one of the reasons why Eleanor Leger, who is the owner and operator of Eden Specialty Ciders, got into ice cider, which is really the heartbeat of that region of Quebec, Canada. And she has developed her own recipes, and it's just incredible ice cider from Eden. But they also make other ciders too, and they're all equally great. And some are in glass formats, and some are in cans. And the summer edition of their Brut Rosé is really tasty. I have to admit, I opened up the first can after it was cold, and we're in a heat wave right now, and it took me about a New York second to crank that back. Oh, it was so good. But what I really like is the label. And that's really spot on to the topic that we're talking this week, because there's some beautiful artwork, and that is done by a designer who is based on the East Coast. His name is Eric Lewandowski. He does some really great work, and you could contact him. I'll put a link in the show notes if you want to get some great artwork. On the label, what they do straight away is they talk about their mission. So it says, our mission is to support local orchards by fermenting flavorful and delicious ciders from rare heirloom and tannic apple varieties. So from the get-go, you're getting information. Then it says apple varieties grown for cider. And it says 15 heirloom apple varieties infused with red currant juice. So for somebody like myself who knows what that means that, that juice from the red currants, it could be like a sweeter profile than expected. But I could look down along the can, and it actually has a dry to sweet scale, and it says semi-dry. So we're going to get a little bit of sweetness, but that dry coming through because of the varieties that they're using. It also says 100% locally and sustainably grown at Eden Orchards, Scott Farm, Sunrise Orchards, and Windfall Orchard. So they just named all the different sources that they're bringing their apples in from. So that's huge kudos to them. Tells us a little bit about the taste. It says taste, clean and fruity. Bright red berry and apple flavors with light, earthy tannin and lingering crispness. Wow. And then to top it off, they continue with there's 15 grams of residual sugar, 16 grams of malic acid, light tannin, what it's infused with, which is a red currant juice, filtered and canned, no sugar added, color or preservatives added. So, wow. And then to be even smarter, they said, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Eden Ciders. That's a whole lot of marketing and a whole lot of info on a can. So I might be standing there in the little can aisle of cider or bottle aisle of cider, wondering what the heck am I going to grab? They all look really pretty, all the labels. And then I just turn the can to the back, and I have a whole bunch of info to make my decision. That's going to be enticing. I'll also say that this was 6.9% alcohol by volume. Also has the calories, 160 calories. Man, just wow, right? All in a can, and yet a really beautiful presentation. I crushed that sucker back. I bet if you got some of this Brut Rosé from Eden Ciders, you would too. I highly recommend it. They sell it in 4-packs, and you can never go wrong with Eden Specialty Ciders. So thanks again. Some more good news coming out of Vermont, and I think I have a little bit more to say about that, so we'll be right back. In case you don't know, I lead Totally Cider tours both nationally here in North America and also in Europe. And I've been leading New England cider tours for a couple times now, up from Massachusetts up into Vermont. And I stop at Fable Farm, which is a lovely cidery. Two brothers, John and Christopher, run that. And we've had our lunch there. We've had a cider dinner there. And the last time I was there, I was hoping, to have some Eden cider. And I knew that somebody was going to come down and maybe deliver some cider for our lunch. And wouldn't you know it, I turn around and there is Eleanor Leger. She had surprised me. I was like over the moon for that. And of course, she was there. Sebastian from Flag Hill Farm was there serving his brandy. We poured the brandy on top of ice cream for dessert because that is exactly how, one of the many ways that you could have it. I also like just sipping it on the side. But on top of ice cream is so decadent. We also had Teddy Weber of Tin Hat Cider, and of course the guys from Fable Farm. And that's how I love to do Totally Cider tours, to have a gastronomic feast with the makers, drinking their product, having local foods, and seeing the beautiful sights, seeing the covered bridges of Vermont. So I can't wait to run another New England cider tour, and maybe you'd come along. Whether it's in the U.S. or in Europe, I'm planning trips now for France and the U.K. for 2022. So if you'd like to know a little bit more before I release that to everyone else, do send me an email to info@ciderchat.com.
Walking through the orchards.
Well, I think there's no better time than now to grab a glass and head to our featured presentation, which is part 3 from the 4-part series of Bringing the Bellies to the Bar, as recorded at CraftCon 2021, and that was put on by the Three Counties Cider Imperial Association, and this is their annual trade conference for that region. So do keep your sights on next year, springtime, for next year's 2022 CraftCon. Let's bring everybody up to date if this is your first time tuning into Cider Chat, and do know that part 1 was on who is your audience? So it's a universal question for any business owner, but frankly, it's also kind of a good life question, like who is your audience? Who are you hanging out with? And if you're not hanging out with the right folks, who do you want to attract? I mean, that's true in personal life and business. And that's what we first delved into in this part 1 of the series, and that was episode 274. In last week's episode, we discussed strategy. What's your strategy for getting your cider out to the market? How do you view that? And do know that the panel that is compiled here and speaking in this week's episode and part 1 through 4, none of us are commercial cider makers, but we're all part of the industry in one way or the other. Myself, I am the moderator, and of course you know me as a producer and host of Cider Chat. But we also had Kath Potter. She hails from the UK, and she's a palmier. We have Adam Wells, also from the UK, and he is a cider writer. You could check out his stuff at Cider Review. And then we have Nikki Kong from Cat in a Glass, which is an online bottle shop. So we have a particular vantage point here, and I think that's going to really add to this week's conversation, which is on content. So we presented the topic as content. And for folks in our side of the page who aren't necessarily makers but are reviewing it, writing about it, blogging it, posting it up one way or the other, or selling it as Nikki does, we are the folks that kind of need to be convinced to pull it off the shelf. So I see that as the content, having the maker look at what is your content for getting your product to market. So for instance, for Eleanor Leger, she sends me some cider to let me know what she's producing this year. Unannounced, all of a sudden, a box of cider comes to my doorstep. And for a podcaster who's on every single week talking about it, that's a really handy-dandy thing to have. It informs me. It's like, oh, cool, there's a new release. Excellent. On the flip side of that, my content is my weekly podcast that I publish. So I put that out, and I put it out to the World Wide Web, and it's on all these different podcast directories. But I also post it all day long on all the different social media channels that we have. So at Cider Chat on Twitter, at Cider Chat Ciderville on Instagram. It's also at the Cider Chat Facebook page. The entire episode goes up to the Cider Chat YouTube channel. And occasionally we'll do a little TikTok, and I probably might even do a little TikTok on some ciders that have been coming my way. Social media channels, all these different ways that we put our word, our image, our brand out to the world is content. What is in the can, the product, is content. For me as a producer, is what I'm producing every week, but for the cider maker, it's what's in your can. But there's another piece here that's really becoming more and more into light, which is also the content of personality, if you will, how you conduct yourself out in the world, in the industry, both personally and in business. And now, as consumers are doing more and more by voting with their dollars in terms of, are they going to pull that cider off the shelf where they've heard some not so great things about the cider maker? That is coming into play at a level that we've never seen before. And I really want to recommend that you listen to last week's episode, because Kath Potter, who you won't hear on this week because she did such an eloquent job of talking about the misogynist and sexist labeling that is occurring in the cider world, and people who support that and who don't. We're not really naming names here, but that super stands out. And frankly, cider is a feel-good drink. It's a happy drink. And so creating content and creating a personality around that, I believe, is worth your time. So we're going to delve into that a little bit here on this here episode 276. I have to start remembering what the episodes are. And you'll hear that a little bit. So we won't hear Kath, but we'll hear her on next week's episode as we finish up this series, part 4, which will be on getting in the spotlight. But first, we're going to go to Nikki Kong. I'll dial it in a little bit, and we'll hear her basis of what entices her to pull a cider off the shelf.
People do tend to buy with their eyes, don't they? So if they see something and it really stands out and looks good, people automatically sort of make a beeline for that product. And especially at the moment, like, because I've got my cider just out on the shelves, and as you can see all the different labels, and people, like, if they come in and have a look around, they'll be like, oh, what's this? This looks really cool. So they tend to try it from that. From a personal sort of point of view, it's what sort of like entices me to try something. Tends to be a lot on kind of like word of mouth or like trusted authors. Like if I've read something that Adam's written, for example, or James Finch, I think, oh, that sounds really interesting. I will probably go and try that. So, yeah.
So labels, it's always about labels. It goes back to that.
Yeah, it is. Like customers, that is what they look for. Like personally myself, like, yeah, it's not the be all or end all. But for a lot of customers, it tends to be, yeah, if it looks good, or if it's like going to be hazy, it kind of puts them off it. And yeah, people still sort of drink with their eyes, I think.
Maybe we're going to start seeing labels called, we have like the hazy IPA happening now, and that's right on the label. People actually look for that on the label. We've all of us know that hazy cider has been part of it for a long time. Do you think we'll start seeing hazy cider on labels? What do you think?
No, it's not needed. I guess like people like me and you and Kath and Adam, like, we'll know that the cider is so good, but just like a lot of consumers tend to think otherwise, don't they? Because I'm used to seeing like your mainstream ciders and it's all clear and crisp and things like that. So, yeah.
Well, I'm going to make a bet that we're going to see cider labels with the word hazy on it. I'm just going to put that out here on this day here, April 29, 2021. And when I see it, I'm going to tweet it out to all of you. Okay?
Okay, I look forward to it.
or not. Adam, how about you? What entices you to a product, and conversely, what would turn you away?
Well, I mean, I'm low hanging fruit. I buy almost everything. But when there's so much choice, what stands out to me is the producers who have taken the time to show their working on the label. Like, what apple varieties have you used? What methods have you used? What have you done? Why should I buy your cider rather than any of the other hundreds of medium or sweet or dry ciders? What's the difference? And then, as Nikki says, people do buy with their eyes, and I know. I review ciders every week. I know that the label doesn't make a difference to the actual taste, but again, it's proof that some sort of time and attention has been given to something, and people do buy with their eyes, and it's something, especially if we're talking about ciders that people maybe want on a dinner table, or that they want to share, or show their friends. There's never not going to be a majority of people who are interested in buying with their eyes and going, that looks great, I'll try that. So for me, the information is kind of absolutely top of the tree, but presentation is hugely important. And I think an example of a cidery who does both of those things incredibly well is Little Pomona. Their labels all look beautiful, but then you turn the label around and they have, they've put a huge amount of time and effort into writing a really detailed description of what this cider is, what it's made from, how they've made it. And they usually do a food pairing and a temperature serving suggestion, which I think way more ciders should do, because I think loads of ciders would just get automatically put in the fridge by most consumers, and that just doesn't happen. So yeah, I mean, they're Little Pomona and Rough Cider particularly are two of my lodestars, I guess, when it comes to labels, both image and detail. But so what would turn me off, I guess, is A, not being given those things, but B, just, I mean, Kath's already harkened on the non-inclusive, sexist, misogynistic labels, but it's also, we are all on social media now. There's been a lot of discussion in the group on the right. It's not just those labels. It's cider makers who openly either approve of those labels or say they're not sexist and have their heads in the sand about it, or in some other way contribute to making cider a non-inclusive sort of society, or difficult or uncomfortable society to be in. I mean, just last week there was an instance of this, and obviously it's only in that instance one cidery that's perpetrated the image, but you then see on social media all these other makers who are saying, no, it's fine, that's not sexist, that's totally appropriate. What, and not only that, but lambasting the people who are saying, no, this isn't appropriate, take this imagery down. So it's how you conduct yourself as a maker, as a producer, as a small business person is just as critical, because word gets around, and if people see, well, this cider maker has endorsed this instance of misogyny or non-inclusivity, then people aren't going to buy your cider. So it's not just not doing the images, it's being seen to say these images are inappropriate. There's no place for this. If you're making a place for those images, and you're trying to shout down those who are suggesting that those images are offensive, then you're just as culpable as the people who created the image in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So there's a time not to be on social media, essentially, is one way to kind of cut to the short here. I would also, social media of Facebook, I really want to recommend, while we have this forum here, to really speak to the commercial makers who are posting on social media or having a industry discussion, to not put that out on a medium where folks who are consumers can see that. So to be really conscious of that, you're posting, and keep conversations in that. And you only have to look at spirits, wine, or beer to see that they are keeping that within their industry, and to really be cautious, because if we're trying to lift up cider and bring it as a professional, quality, quaffable drink, we really want to know when we shouldn't be on social media. So I'd just like to say that the piece that I really entices me for a product is a story. And so it's not just a label, but it's a story. And that's what I'm seeing on social media, how people conduct themselves. So it's kind of echoing what everybody says, but it's really important to me to see how the producers are making it so cool. And then just going back to what Adam said, and on the labels, and Nikki, let's face it, animals and cartoons really work. People love it. Sometimes it gets a little wiggy on the labeling piece for people, for like the TTB here in the US. They block things coming in from Europe from times because of that. But, who doesn't love animals, right? We got Alfie and we have the cat. I mean, come on, it's beautiful. In terms of animals, I was referring to Alfie, the dog, who is Kath Potter's dog, who is in the background making noises the whole time. But many producers will use animals on their labels, and for the most part, we don't find it offensive. Cartoons have been a problem in the past, at least importing into the U.S. Most notably was the lawsuit brought out by the Shelton brothers because the TTB was not allowing them to import a beer which is called Santa's Butt because they felt like it would be too tempting for kids to try that beer. But was spelled with two T's, B-U-T-T. And what a actual butt is in the drinks world is a cask, an oak cask. So Dan Shelton was able to convince the courts and was given the opportunity to be able to import it as such. But it can get a little bit gray depending on how you're pushing the buttons there, so beware. One notable cartoon I think about is what Little Pomona does with this female that's drawn, and she has what's called like a babushka, like a scarf around her head and tied underneath the chin. It's just a lovely imagery. And then other labels that really make sense, what Adam Wells was talking about with raw cider is on every single bottle, it's very clear and concise what apples or pears are in that glass. So you know exactly what you're getting for, much like the can earlier I spoke about with Eden's cider. So this is really, really critical. I want to just follow up with one other point I made earlier in this conversation with the panelists and talking about makers publishing kind of their dirty laundry or their questions on a social media channel that is really, I believe, whose purpose is for consumers. And that is kind of like nails on a scratchboard to me when I see questions about, hey, what glass is everybody using? Or how do you manage this? Or how do you manage that? On a public forum that is really viewed by thousands of people, primarily for appreciation for cider. I don't recommend that as a business technique or strategy. Why? Well, think about it. Don't you want people to be confident in your product? Don't you want them to think that you know what you're doing versus you're having to ask online how to package your cider or figure something out? I mean, there are other forums, there are associations and more private forums to discuss that. So I don't really see what a particular brand or a maker is going to be gaining from that by posting that online. To me, that's just lazy instead of seeking out the sources to do that. And, we have a very small niche audience out there in Ciderville, and we want them to be confident in the products that are being produced. I do not recommend that. Bring it off the page, put it into a private Facebook group. There's lots of people with similar questions, and that would be a great way to do it. Why not? So that's what I was speaking about there, and I really put caution, and I'll just name names here in terms of, I see this happen a lot on the Hard Cider Appreciation page on Facebook, and I'm always scratching my head. Why is that? Just be an appreciation, share good love of cider, and you could kind of squabble about that if you want, but avoid questions of business terms. Show that you're competent. Step forward with that at all times. Alrighty, so next week we'll be coming back with our final part of this series, part 4, which is getting your ciders in the spotlight. And once again, we'll hear from all 4 panelists. That's Nikki Kong of Cat in the Glass, an online bottle shop, Adam Wells of Cider Review, and Kath Potter, a Palmier, and myself, Rhea Windcaller. If you haven't subscribed yet, you might want to follow Cider Chat on any one of the social media channels I've been talking about. You can find links in the show notes to all the folks who are speaking on this here episode and all mentions of different products that we've been discussing. The world would be a really different place if it wasn't for the fine patrons of this here podcast, many of which who are not commercial makers, who do not make cider. they might even drink it a little bit, but they just love apples and orchards and the entertainment of listening to Cider Chat. And to you, I tip my glass and say thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's really helping lift up the cider in the news at a level that it wouldn't have made without you. I mean, to be online for 6 years, putting out a podcast every week, I'll be quite honest, it takes a lot to keep on drawing up content in that way. But it's the folks who write into me and to send me good cheer, and certainly to also financially support it. It's a big deal because we're a small niche community, but we're big in a big, heartful way, and that you can never take away. So thank you so kindly. And certainly also to the commercial cider makers who are part of the Cider Going Up campaign, and to all the commercial makers who support Cider Chat at whatever level you can. It helps us all rise up together with a full glass. Become a patron today. You can find the donate button at ciderchat.com. And with that, I leave you here. This is Real Wind Caller signing off for now. Looking forward to seeing you in Ciderville.
We like cider, we like ponds, we love orchards and having fun. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes there is. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes there is. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Oh yes there is a reason. We like walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. We like cider, we like ponds, we like orchards, having some fun. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes there is. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes there is. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Oh yes there is. There is a reason. We like walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. Oh yeah. We like cider. Oh yes we do. We like ponds. Oh yes we do. We love orchards, having some fun. There is a reason why we do it like this. Ba-da-da-dum. There's a reason why we do it like this. Ba-da-da-dum. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Ba-da-da-dum. Ba-da-da-dum. We like walking down the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. Oh yeah. We like cider. Ba-da-da-dum. We like ponds. Oh yes we do. We like orchards, having some fun. Yeehaw!